Hello and welcome to World Talks. I'm your host, Diana Skaya. A sweeping 30% tariff on all goods from the European Union and Mexico set to take effect August 1st has been announced by President Donald Trump. Framed as a matter of trade, fairness, and national security, the move is sending shockwaves through transatlantic relations. Now, while the EU is holding off an immediate retaliation, it has warned of up to 100 billion euros in countermeasures if talks collapse. So what's really driving these tariffs and how should Europe respond? Well, joining me now to unpack all of this is Tomasz Kasprowicz, editor-in-chief of Res Publica Nowa. Tomasz, so happy to have you here with us on World Talks this evening. Before we get into that, I just want to ask you this. I mean, breaking news, what's happening exactly as we speak is NATO Secretary Rutte and Donald Trump are currently meeting at the White House. Trump reportedly saying that severe tariffs on Russia if no deal is reached. Can you tell us a couple of words on this? I mean, I know the meeting is currently taking place, but what can we expect the outcome of this meeting to be, according to you?
Well, as far as Trump is concerned, I'm not very comfortable with making any sorts of predictions because anything can come out of that. But what we are hearing recently is a certain switch of Trump's position towards Russia. We know he was pretty fond of Vladimir Putin. And what we hear in recent days is that probably there might be some sanctions coming for Russia with respect to the Ukrainian conflict. And since both sides were dragging their feet with respect to the talks, Ukraine was having much better PR, while Putin was clearly arrogant. And this is not something that Trump takes lightly. So possibly we may see increasing pressure from the United States on Russia to force them to start the negotiations. How successful that will be, I'm not sure, because ending this war will be a disaster for Russia one way or the other due to the economic collapse of war economy in case there is no more war. But those pressures are nevertheless probably coming.
All right, Tomasz, thanks for that brief brief response. Now, I'd like to invite you to listen to to remarks by Foreign Minister of Denmark, Lars Rasmussen.
We want an agreement with the U.S., but it must be a fair deal. We are 450 million citizens in the European Custom Unit, which give us a lot of leverage. So we want a deal. But there's an old wording saying if you want peace, you have to prepare for war. And I think that's where we are. Of course, we shouldn't impose countermeasures on this stage, but we should prepare to be ready to use all the tools in the toolbox.
Prepared to use all the tools in the toolbox. Tomasz, what do you make of this statement, of what we just heard?
Well, probably Europe wisened up. What we observe right now, we cannot call it unprecedented because just a couple of months ago, we've seen almost exactly the same scenario playing out. Trump threatening large tariffs to basically everybody. And at that point, the European Union was really careful and not willing to make any antagonistic moves. But what we've seen is that those that were willing to fight for themselves actually won. Of course, not everybody's China. And China was able to put such a big pressure on Trump that he basically had to cave in. And he did. So we see that Trump responds well to force and backs down pretty easily. That's why currently he is nicknamed Taco, which means Trump always chickens out. because every bluff he made when he was called, basically he folded. So now Europe seems to learn this lesson and be far more assertive and threatening also United States with serious costs. And let's remember the American economy is also under the strain of many moves of Trump so far. It's performing a bit better than expected, but this is still quite a perilous situation for US. So Europe knows it can hit where it hurts, especially the Trump electorate, and probably is willing to use those countermeasures very carefully and cautiously, as Europeans do, which is not necessarily a good thing when dealing with Trump, but far more assertively than before. So showing the toolbox and showing that we have a leverage as well is a negotiating strategy, as is an ultimatum of Trump of reaching the agreement by August 1st. Let's remember that Trump needs some successes very badly. He said he will win all of those trade wars very fast, very quickly, with huge gains. This didn't happen. Opposite, he had to basically back down. So he's in a situation he needs those wins. So far, the only agreements he made was with Vietnam, China, and UK, and those are not very comprehensive deals mostly. So he wants some wins, and he's pressing for that. But as everybody learned that the best strategy to deal with Trump is responding tit for tat, it will be for him much harder than it was a couple of months ago.
But let me ask you this. I mean, if this does, come into effect on the 1st of August, which EU countries do you think or industries will be hit the hardest by the Trump administration's new tariffs?
Well, Trump is not really discriminating. His tariffs are not selective. He's hitting everybody equally. And of course, the more you export to United States, the more affected you will be. Of course, in the short term, the sales and the cost will be mostly eaten by American consumers, because that's how tariffs mostly work. Still looking at especially German weak recovery, that might be a big problem there, as their automotive industry is not in the very best of shapes and definitely will be hit by tariffs quite heavily. So probably Germans are the ones that are most afraid of what may happen due to the weak performance of their economy in recent years. On the other hand, countries that are far less exposed to exports to the United States, including Central Europe mostly, may feel a little bit safer. Of course, I don't mean the countries that are very well integrated in German logistic chains, because that might be a problematic case for them. But the better diversified economies, larger economies, should do much better.
Tomasz, you did mention Germany, but let me ask you this. What about Poland?
Well, Poland is for many decades recently in a very favorable positions, because whatever is happening, good or bad, is benefiting Poland. So that's probably some kind of adjustment for last 200 years that were not very favorable for Poland. Poland is not exposed in large way to US tariffs. Of course, there are people in Poland believing that special relations of the right in Poland might help Poland by itself to get a better deals with Trump. That, of course, will not happen. Yet, this is another chance to diversify and find new places to sell, as happened before. For example, when we had an embargo from Russia for selling agricultural products, Poland was able to find the customers in the West with better margins. So we should look at it as an opportunity while we are not really as Poles that much exposed to what's going on with the exports to the United States.
Let me ask you this. How do you think that this trade war could actually hurt the EU-U.S. relations when it comes to unity on Ukraine and NATO defense goals?
Those topics are so far largely independent. And as long as they will remain independent, they shouldn't affect that much what Trump is doing, especially considering his recent shift in his opinions. However, I can see Trump using this topic as a leverage and as an argument when trying to negotiate the trade deals. How successful that would be, I'm not sure, because that would be completely a new angle, that's kind of difficult to say which countries would be really convinced by this sort of argument. So let's hope it doesn't go this way, because the largest economists probably would be willing to sacrifice American support for Ukraine, while the smaller ones that are not that important would be willing to sacrifice more, but that's not enough for a US deal. So far, this is separate. Let's hope it stays this way.
Just very briefly, I mean, Tomasz, do you predict that this could really escalate, this tit for tat? You mentioned that word earlier. It could escalate further into a broader economic or even political standoff between the European Union and the United States?
Well, let me tell you first that I don't see how the US-European relation can sink any lower than they already are. The trust is mostly destroyed, and nobody is trusting Americans in Europe at this point. Of course, doesn't mean that dialogue is broken and we are enemies. No, but we are far more cautious right now of Americans. The escalation of trade war can happen. We've seen that working out with China, where there was escalation. That was eventually won by China.
Right.
We are not sure what would happen if this escalation worked with European Union and United States, and who would back down first. But Trump is by himself looking at the relationships on a transaction basis. So he's dealing with each, let's say, transaction separately, and doesn't
Tomasz,
really understand.
Unfortunately, that's all the time that
connected.
we have. That's all the time that we have this evening. But thank you so much for all your input with us here on World Talks this evening.
Thank you very much.
And that's all for this edition of World Talks here on TVP World. I'm Diana Skaya. Thanks for watching.